Hey, what's up, YouTube? I'm Travis, and this is Sports Fan Network.
Nah, Andrew.
And today in our video, we got our preview for the Eastern Conference in the NBA. And in this video, we'll be ranking what place we think each team will take from 1 to 15. So, Andrew, I'll start with you. Who are you predicting to take the first seed in the East?
Yeah, well, it's a few weeks into the season so far, and so far, there have been some, huge changes already that have changed my perception going into the season. For me, the season really doesn't start until Christmas Day. That's when you kind of transition from football season to basketball season, in a sense. But, early on this season, just going off of what we've seen so far and based off my preseason predictions, I have the Boston Celtics as my number one seed. I really like what they did this offseason, getting Kyrie Irving. They're on fire right now. I believe they're on a 13-game win streak at the time of this recording. So even though they've lost Gordon Hayward for the season for that truly, just really heartbreaking ankle injury that he had, broken ankle that he had, I just love what they're doing so far, and they've been able to show that they can bounce back from that, that loss. Their defense is the best in the NBA, and Kyrie Irving is consistently proven that he can lead his own team. Whereas, I had some questions of that going into the season. He's proven that's not a problem so far this season. And Brad Stevens, he's the second best coach in the NBA, only under Greg Popovich. So I really like what the Boston Celtics are doing so far.
Yeah, the Celtics are looking really good to start off the season. But for me, I still don't have them at the number one seed. For me, it's still the Cleveland Cavaliers. They're still the best team in the East, in my opinion. I know they've really struggled, but they don't have Isaiah Thomas, who's got that hip injury, so he'll be back for the second half of the season. They still got LeBron James, who's the best basketball player on the planet right now. And I just think the Cavs are going to bounce back. It's still really early on, so a lot of people – LeBron said he doesn't really care about the October, the November losses. It's a long season. I think the Cavs, once they start really starting to click, they'll go on a run in the middle to the end of the season to get ready for the playoffs. But for me, I think they're going to take the number one seed from Boston.
Yeah, moving on to my number two seed. This one's going to surprise you a bit here. Hold on for a minute here. Milwaukee Bucks. I have them going number two ahead of the Cavaliers on this one. Really interesting here. Yeah. Throwing some fire here. Very interesting. Keeping it interesting here for y'all. But some of my reason for this, again, like you said, LeBron James doesn't really care about the regular season at this point. So going to a team in the Milwaukee Bucks that do care about the regular season, I think Giannis Antetokounmpo, for me, he's my early season pick for the MVP. I think the guy just does it all. He's 7 feet tall. He can handle like a guard. He can pass like a guard. He can score whenever he wants to because there's just no way anyone could stop him getting to the basket and finishing whenever he wants. He's added enough strength at this point in his career to where, you can't bully him outside of the paint. He's going to find ways to score. They're a super long and athletic team. I like Chris Middleton as kind of a second or third scoring option. And they made that trade for Eric Bledsoe just recently. Really adds another scoring threat to this team. And he's a guy that, he can be another ball handler, kind of take the pressure off of Giannis Antetokounmpo. And get this, he's the only player in the NBA over the past few years to average 20 and 6 in the season and not make an all-NBA team. So just interesting right there when you add a guy like Eric Bledsoe. He's kind of been under the radar in Phoenix for a while, but I think he's going to find his niche here in Milwaukee, and that's going to be really good for them in the regular season.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Milwaukee Bucks, but there is no way that the Bucks are going to finish higher than Boston or Cleveland in the East. They're a good team. But besides Giannis, he's a beast. But I just feel like they don't have a consistent second option. Jabari Parker, he's hurt. Chris Middleton, he can be really good at times, but at other times he kind of fades away. So I just don't feel like the Bucks are a really deep team to be a top 2 seed in the East. They got an MVP type caliber player in Giannis, but they really don't have that much help behind him. That's why at the number 2 seed, I have the Boston Celtics. And I just like the moves they did this offseason. They added Kyrie Irving, added Gordon Hayward. He got injured. That was very devastating. But, they got 2 young small forwards in Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. I expect those young guys to step it up and kind of replace that production. I think the Boston Celtics are just a very deep team. I have them at the number 2 seed in the East.
Going on to my number 3, obviously you kind of predicted at this point. I have the Cleveland Cavaliers at the number 3 seed. It's not because I don't think they're not the best team in the Eastern Conference. I just don't think they care at all about the regular season at this point, especially at this point in the season. They're an old team. They're really just going through the motion at this point. I think they'll go on a run late in the season. But, just looking at this, LeBron's going to be LeBron. They're going to a slow start, like I said. They're really bad defensively, though. That's something that I don't think that's necessarily going to improve. They are going to get Isaiah Thomas back at some point, which would definitely help them offensively, getting another guy that can kind of take the pressure off of LeBron offensively. But, if anything, that makes their defense even weaker because Isaiah Thomas is that much of defensive liability with his size and coming off the hip injury. I'm not sure how effective he's going to be defensively at this point. That's just my opinion on the Cavaliers. I still think they're going to win the Eastern Conference, though, at this point. I just don't think they really care at all about the regular season.
See, this is where I totally disagree with you because you say that the Cavaliers' defense is not going to improve, and I say that's almost basically impossible. That's how bad their defense has been. At some point, it's got to get better. So I don't agree with what you said there, but for me, at the number 3 seed, I got the Milwaukee Bucks. I think Giannis will be MVP. He just looks like he's on a mission. And I do really like the trade for Eric Bledsoe. Adds another ball handler, a guy that can facilitate in the offense. But really, besides their starting 5, which is very good, they don't have much of a bench. They kind of have one-dimensional players. So at times, I kind of see them struggle, and they're also young. So I have them at the 3, but they could fluctuate between 3 to 5 seed for me.
Yeah, agreed. This entire area 3 and 5 can really get, messy here in the Eastern Conference. There's a lot of solid teams, I think, at the top. But, we'll talk about it more as we go down the list here. But
I do want to say real quick, you're just really disrespecting LeBron, putting the Cavs at number 3 in the East.
I'm not disrespecting LeBron. I'm disrespecting the rest of the team. There's a difference. But going to my number 4 seed, I have the Washington Wizards finishing 4th in this conference. They have the best backcourt in the conference with Bradley Beal and John Wall. Those two are absolutely dynamic together. They really fit each other's skill sets really well. They play off each other pretty well. Todd, their center is really underrated, I feel like. He's one of the best in the pick and roll game because he sets really good screens. He's a big physical player. He rebounds for them. Plays with a lot of energy. He's still going. He's getting a little bit older at this point in his career for a big guy, but he's still productive at this point. They don't have a lot of great depth, which kind of worries me and why I think they could slip maybe this season. But they were a very good home team last year, and I think that continues this year. Once you establish a home court advantage, I think it's really hard to kind of get rid of that, especially when they have similar talent as last season's team.
Yeah, the Wizards are only going to go as far as Bradley Beal and John Wall carry them, and that's why I don't have them in the top 4 in the East. Those 2 players are very good. They're all-star players. Any franchise would love to have them. But besides them, the Wizards, they basically have no depth. I liked Marcin Gortat a few years ago, but he's getting older in age, so he's kind of becoming less productive. And they just don't really have a bench. So for me, at the number 4 seed, I have the Toronto Raptors. And they're also not a team that's very deep. They lost P.J. Tucker, Corey Joseph, Damari Carroll, and Patrick Patterson, which are all big role players for them. But talking about best backcourts in the East, Toronto Raptors are right up there with Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan. Those guys are game changers. They're all-star players. And the Toronto Raptors always play really good regular season basketball and just completely choke in the playoffs. So that's why I have them at the number 4 seed. I think the Raptors are one key player away from being true contenders, but they're more like pretenders right now with the current team.
Yeah, I have the Raptors at number 5, and the reason I have the Wizards just ahead of them at number 4 is because I do believe their backcourt is better at this point. And like you said, both teams don't really have the greatest depth in the world, so it's really reliant on those 2 teams with their backcourts. I just think the Wizards are slightly better. With the Raptors here, they kind of kept the status quo going into the season, bringing back Serge Ibaka, keeping their similar core here. Like you said, they got rid of some role players, but by and large, this is the same team as last year. And DeRozan and Lowry, they're going to put up numbers, they're going to score. I just don't know if they do enough of everything else to kind of make up for some of the other problems with this team in terms of their depth. They have a really young, good big in Valanciunas. They don't really use him enough, which is kind of disappointing for me to see because he is a very big, physical, talented big man that I think if they put him a little bit more to work on the offense side of the ball, could really, they could really make some noise in the Eastern Conference because he's very good in the low post, which is something they could use in the playoffs when teams things start kind of slow down a bit on the playoffs. But as a regular season team, they're pretty solid usually.
Yeah, me and you, we got our 4 and our 5 seeds flipped. For me at number 5, I got the Washington Wizards. And you look at they lost some key players this offseason. They lost Brandon Jennings, they lost Trey Burke, and they lost Bojan Bogdanovic, who was a good shooter, able to spread the floor. So I think the Wizards actually got worse. They lost a few good role players. That's why I have them at the number 5 seed. But moving on, who do you have as your number 6 seed?
Yeah, 6. I have the Detroit Pistons. They've gone off to a really hot start this year. They look like one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. I expect them to start to cool down, though, soon. Just some of the things I like about this team, though. Avery Bradley, the acquisition of him in the offseason, I feel like he's really a culture changer for this team. This is a team last year that really did not have an identity. Stan Van Gundy wants this team to be a defensive-minded team. A lot of pick and roll with Andre Drummond and Reggie Jackson. They just didn't really figure it out last year. They had a lot of internal problems. Stan Van Gundy, as opposed to the coach and the president of basketball operations there, kind of wanted to trade pretty much everybody by the end of the season. It's not really going to work that way, obviously. So, they kind of had the same roster as this year, but I feel like Avery Bradley makes a big jump for this team. They need consistent play out of Reggie Jackson, Andre Drummond, though. Reggie Jackson specifically, because he really did not have all that good of a year last year. We saw Ish Smith kind of had a better year than him last year. He's more effective with Ish Smith on the floor for the Pistons. And Drummond, he's one of those guys that he's got so much talent. If he can just put it all together, he could be a dominant force in the Eastern Conference, I believe.
Yeah, and I want to talk about Avery Bradley, like you said, who I think is just a tremendous player. He should be first team all defense. He's one of the best 3-and-D wings in the league. He can facilitate. He's just a hard, scrappy player. But for me at the 6th seed, I got the Philadelphia 76ers. And they just had a great offseason. They added J.J. Redick. They needed shooting. That's a guy that can help space the floor. Markelle Fultz, he's more of a prospect at this point. He's kind of hurt with his shoulder, but he's a very promising player. So right now for Sixers fans, it's no more trust the process. The rebuild is over. It's time for Philly to get back to the playoffs. With Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, they need to stay healthy if that's going to happen. And my bold prediction, maybe not that bold, but Ben Simmons is going to win the Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a bold prediction there. Reggie, he just looks legit at this point.
Yeah.
I really like Simmons so far. I have the 7th seed. For me, I have the Philadelphia 76ers at my 7th seed. There's a ton of young talent on this team, like you said, not even including guys like Dario Saric, who's a very good stretch 4. We'll see what they do with Jahlil Okafor. He kind of doesn't have a playoffs on this team. But if they can find the right suitor, the kind of trade for him, that could be another, veteran role player maybe they can get out of that. We'll see what happens there. I really like the addition of J.J. Redick. Kind of brings a veteran presence to this team and some much-needed shooting. Other than, him and Covington, they really don't have much consistent shooting on this team. So getting J.J. Redick in there really helps this team out. And Simmons and Embiid, they already look like, young, budding superstars in this league, especially Embiid if he can stay healthy. They can just do it all out there on the basketball court. Very exciting for 76ers fans.
Yeah, for me at the 7th seed, I got the young Orlando Magic team. This is a team that's a plethora of young talent. Guys like Jonathan Simmons, Nikola Vucevic, Aaron Gordon, Alfred Payton. Just lots of young guys. These are guys that all expect to step up and help get the Magic back into the postseason again. And they really didn't lose any key guys. They were pretty aggressive in free agency. They drafted Jonathan Isaac, who's looks like he's going to be a very good player. The Magic have started out really hot this season. That's why 7th seed right now.
Yeah, I like what the Magic are doing so far, but for me, kind of closing out the playoff section, here's my number 8 seed. I have the Miami Heat. This is basically the same team as last year. They added Kelly Olynyk, was kind of their big addition going into the offseason. They finished 30-11 in the second half of the season last year. Really ended the year on a bang. They were really caught fire. They just missed out in the playoffs, so they just did not get out to a good start last season. Eric Spoelstra is a pretty solid coach overall, and he gets these guys to kind of play up to maximize their talent game in, game out. There's really not a star talent on this team. When you look at it, Hassan Whiteside, he's a very good defensive big guy, but he's not really a guy that can take over a game. Goran Dragic's a nice player, but again, he's not a guy that can take over a game consistently for you. That's just something they were lacking going into this offseason. going into the season. And, I just don't see this team having a higher ceiling than maybe, as high as a 6 seed. But for now, I just think there's some younger, more talented teams in the Eastern Conference. So for me, they're at the 8 seed.
Yeah, for me, finishing off the playoff picture, in the 8 seed, I have the Detroit Pistons. And we talked about how much we love Avery Bradley. They drafted Luke Kennard, who's going to help space the floor. They lost Marcus Morris, which isn't a problem because they got a good 4 waiting to get some more minutes, and Henry Ellenson.
Yep.
He looks like he can be very productive for them. And for the Pistons, if they are going to get back to the playoffs, the young players need to step up. Like you said, Henry Ellenson, Stanley Johnson. This is a guy that really has not been productive at all. He's going into his 3rd year in the NBA. This is where I think Stanley Johnson is going to have a breakout year, prove he's not a bust. He's very athletic. He's a 3-and-D guy, and he's a guy that can also cut, facilitate. I really like him. And Andre Drummond, he really needs to play better this year. Last year was unacceptable for him. He has the traits to be a superstar. He just has to put the work in. But I think for the Pistons, they're going to be making a push for the playoffs. I think Andre Drummond will be a big part of that.